Hello, my name is Robin Kay. I'm from UOIT in Oshawa, Canada, which is very close to Toronto. And I'm going to be talking about examining blended learning for adult learners with special needs. So let's start out with why did we do this study? We were looking at a group of adults in a literacy and basic skills program. And these adults have a variety of special needs and challenges. And the program is designed to improve opportunities for employment and employment skills, and to gain prerequisite courses for post-secondary education. And our idea was, can a blended learning approach with a combination of face-to-face and online supplemental resources help serve this population better and address some of those special needs? Specifically, can the online component help address some of those challenges? Let's take a look at the previous research. Some of the barriers that these students experience are time management, employment and the nature of a job that they have, their family situations, financial issues, and disabilities. In these programs, the LBS programs, technology is generally not used, and that's why we had the idea that it might be actually helpful. The blended learning approach could provide flexibility, support, and a series of assistive tools. So we looked at almost 150 students. Looks like 2/3 were male and 1/3 female, between 20 and 45 years of age. Almost half had been out of education for 6 or more years. They were unemployed. Most were unemployed and or had government assistance. And 27%, almost a third, had some form of disability. Well, a quarter to a third. We collected data from a variety of sources. There was a series of Likert scale questions, 7 items focused on the face-to-face component, and 5 items focused on the online component of the blended learning instruction. And there was one open-ended question focusing on how the program could better support learning. We also conducted 37 interviews. Now, before I discuss the results, let me help you understand how the program was designed. It was delivered face-to-face. Students were required to come in, but there was also an LMS, learning management system, where supplemental resources and links were stored to help students, particularly if they missed class. Well, it's pretty clear from this chart here, or table, that students really liked the face-to-face part or component. If you look at the agree here, we're getting almost 90% agree that, or more than 90% agree that face-to-face was important for learning, that the in-class communication with instructors was important, that the face-to-face part met their learning needs, and that they learned more effectively in a face-to-face setting. Now, in-class communication with peers was not as important, but still almost 2/3 agreed that it was an effective component. When you look at the comments from the open-ended questions and the interviews, there were 77 positive comments and only 14 negative comments. The positive comments focused on collaboration with instructor and peers, receiving encouragement from the instructors, a general preference for face-to-face format, and getting immediate feedback. Negative comments about the face-to-face component were that it was a rigid schedule. And that's a problem for some of these students who have families to take care of and perhaps part-time jobs to attend, and so time management is an issue there. And there was also a few negative comments about ineffective teaching strategies. Now, the online component wasn't perceived as effective. And if you look at this here, and we look at the agree only, Compared to the other chart where we're into the 90%, we only have about a third of the students, maybe to 40% here, felt that the online part met the learning needs, that the activities were easy to use, that it was important for learning, and that they would like more online learning. And in fact, when they were asked learning effectively through online instruction, we were asked about that, only about a quarter agreed that it was effective. Remember, this is a 7-point scale. Now, it's important here to note that a number here, almost 50% were neutral about it. They had no opinion about whether it met their learning needs. Now, that opens up an interesting possibility of whether they even used the online component or whether it was provided the kinds of materials that they needed. Of note here is that 50% felt that online didn't help them. And again, this might have been a reflection of technology skills, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later here. When we look at the comments coming from the open-ended questions in the interviews, 37 were positive, 39 negative. The positive comments, the people that actually used online learning, felt that online learning helped with time management, so that when they weren't there, they could actually access resources and materials to help catch up. They liked the supplemental resources. It improved their learning skills, and some wanted more online learning. The negative comments were really more preference for face-to-face, so not necessarily against online, but a preference for face-to-face. What's important here and noteworthy is there was a lack of confidence in using the technology with a number of students. That lack of confidence might have prevented them from using the online resources. So where do we go with this research? Well, I think we need a long-term study. This study was conducted over one term, so we might take a look at this to see how blended learning works in the long term. It might be effective to provide some technology training for students and support so that they could learn online materials more effectively or learn with them more effectively. It's important to look at the quality of online support. So in this case, videos weren't offered, and they might have been quite helpful if you had missed a class. Interactive activities online might have been helpful for students. And in general, more meaningful integration of the online tools with learning. They were really a supplemental resource that students might or might not use, and it appears from the neutral reaction that close to half the students may not have even used the online learning. So it's one thing to prefer face-to-face, but if you haven't really tried online, it's hard to make a comparison. In this case, we're not trying to compare. We're just seeing, can the online component help address some of those time management needs? Students with disabilities might be able to go in for information. Students that are experiencing challenges might be able to watch some videos, again, of information presented in class. And the last question, which is related, is it's important to ask students what could make online support more helpful and to help address the challenges that these students are experiencing. Here's my contact information, and thanks for listening.